Yeah, yep, sure, definitely. I'd like to uh, I would love to share the story. So like I was an open source contributor for a long time. Started contributing in 2013 or so. Attended a couple of Dev Fest at the time. Made some contributions. But we have never done anything in open source as a business, and this is the first time which we are building an open source business. And yeah, we started in 2016, 2017 times where a couple of my friends were working at Freshworks. We figured out there is an opportunity to build something which Freshworks didn't actually solve at that time. So we gathered together, we started working on it. And yeah, I mean, like we built a product. It was like completely like closed source. We never made it open source or anything. We were trying to build a product. It didn't work out quite well, so we shut the whole thing down in 2017 and went different ways. But we were passionate about the space. We looked at different options, somewhat similar to what we could do, and finally ended up, building an open source alternative to Intercom. So it's we just like try to open source the thing which we have built 2 years back. There was like quite a lot of data privacy regulations which were coming in, so we thought maybe this would help. People can self-host the solution and use it on their premise, and that was the beginning. And we went finding on Hacker News. It was quite unexpected, and from there we started building the product from the feedback from the community. And yeah, afterwards, around a year after that, we started charging customers, for support services and stuff like that. And that was the point where we applied to YC as well, and we got into Y Combinator W21 batch. Went through YC this year from January to March, and it was a great experience. And afterwards, we raised a small round of about 1.5 million US dollars, and yeah, that's where we are. We're building products, and we are growing the team. So yeah,
Yeah. So how big your team is right now?
we are a 9 member team. So yeah, including the three founders, we are a 9 member team right now.
So like I was talking to two other maintainers, like authors of like FOSS project, and
Mhm.
so couple of things which were common in both was that they both started their FOSS contribution, open source contribution with their the project that they are actually maintaining, and had some good like users right now. So I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, because I believe if somebody is attending these sessions, they might think that okay, I mean, if I start contributing, that project might get some good user base. So is it like that, or you really have to like keep contributing, and some of your project might get some good traction? And I mean, is it like that?
Um, yeah, it depends. I think it should solve a problem first of all. So every project starts with developer having a problem, or people seeing some kind of problem. If it's if there is large set of users who have to have happen to have the same problem, then yes, I think if you keep at it, then probably people might come. But yeah, it depends on the kind of the problem you're solving. It's just a like yeah, I mean, just try having maintain that kind of contribution structure every frequently, so that people will get to know that you are here. And I think there is another part where you have to market the product. Even though you're open source, uh, it might not get attention. So when we open sourced it, nobody cared. It was there open for a month or two, and finally when we posted it on Hacker News, that's the point where people started coming in, and then giving out feedback. So it's definitely important to have that kind of an idea where how you can get it to a larger user base rather than just sitting on the code base. But yeah, I mean, should solve a problem, you should market it properly, and then you'll find some users if you keep doing like improving the product.
Okay, so what is your journey into open source contribution? Was the Chatwood your first shot, first contribution, or you have some other projects where you have contributed?
No, that's what I mentioned, right? Like, this is not my first contribution. So I used to contribute to open source from way back in like 2013 or 14. So we it was mostly like, doc updates and stuff like that. It's like code or anything. But yeah, I mean, like we used to provide some of the updates on like popular frameworks and stuff like that. And that's where I met a couple of people in Swayambra Malayalam Computing SMC. I attended like Deb Fest, which was also there. So yeah, I mean it goes back to like 4 or 5 years back. So yeah, from there like I used to, like whenever I do something, if there is something which I can contribute, I definitely try to put that in whenever I can.
Okay, so have you been to any hackathon?
Yeah, but like not open source hackathons.
Okay, so how was your experience? I mean, how? Okay, so the reason I'm asking this question is there are a lot of participants, who are like, so we have FOSS Hack coming tomorrow and then day after tomorrow. So I mean, how does it help someone as a like an individual or as a team to learn? How does that goes?
Yeah, I think so. Like, like whenever I participated, our whole motive was to like provide a functional item at the end of the session, so that we can demo it to the people or like the judges who are there. So I think it's a great way to learn, as well as like you have very short amount of time. You prioritize a lot of things to get this thing done. It helps you in longer term when you, if you're like working somewhere or like doing something else, these kind of skills would come in handy. And I think it's a great place to learn. It's a great item to like do. So yeah, it's fun to be there. Mhm. Yeah, I think it was obviously like in hobbyists, people who have like a website or something, just wanted to have a chat plugin, started using it. Then like there were like smaller startups who have like 1 to 2 member team, just like looking at the support. Then came like larger companies with a dedicated support team, and probably like right now we are looking at like larger deployments with a lot more number of people. So yeah, it obviously comes from someone who is a developer who wants to like use the product.
I hope like, does that answer your question, Costa? Yes. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience so far? You can actually unmute and just talk as well. So yeah, in case you have any question in between, either you can write in the chat box or you can just unmute and start asking your question. So yeah, moving ahead. I know, like, for the beginners. So I have, I'm talking to a lot of students throughout the colleges, in India,
Mhm.
and so few question that I few questions that I get is basically. Like, so each project have multiple stacks to, you have to learn something out of it. For example, I was talking to a junior of my alma mater, and then he said, so I want to build this, but I have very little knowledge about that. So
Mhm.
my question is, how somebody can like start learning into, for example, they want to build something, but for that they need to know few things, right? I mean, you can't just think about it and start building. You have to have some experience with that. You need to have team members, right, who can help you in that. So how the beginners should start learning and then start contributing to the open source?
Yeah, I think like to answer your question, you don't need to entirely know a thing to like build a product or like build a use case. There are like code options available right now, which is good enough to build a prototype. So the first thing is to get something from the idea to probably like a prototype or something, so that it can be displayed to somebody, or it can be shown to someone to take feedback on. So my suggestion would be to just don't wait on learning frameworks or learning languages. Figure out like what is the bare minimum which you can build with your skills which you have right now, to get it out to the people to get feedback on. And if you have something which can be used to gather feedback, that'll be a starting point. And rest of the things, if you do that, then I'm sure that you'll figure out the rest of the stuff as well.
Okay, that's a fair point. So, anybody have any other opinion on the same question? How okay, okay, how Chatwood handles competition? Because being open source, if any competitor is building a commercial service on top of Chatwood, they will have a little edge, because whatever deployment you guys do, they'll have those features, but Chatwood won't have what they built. Won't it hurt the commercials of Chatwood as a company?
Yeah, I think there is product is not just code, in my opinion, because there is quite a lot of thought involved in decisions, how a feature is being developed, or how a use case is being solved. There is quite a lot of product work which is happening, and that I don't think having the code would just work, or people somebody can actually build bigger business than you if they just have the code. But having said that, we do see a possibility that somebody can use our code and probably build something other than Chatwood has. But at this point, my theory is that if I'm going to compete against my free offering, there is no viable business right now. So we have other options which would provide different values to the users, which cannot be replicated in an open source, by just using the open source code. So yeah, I mean, so differentiating based on value is what is important, rather than um, competing against people who are using your code.
Okay, does that answer your question, Ayush?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pranav. Just a
Yeah.
small follow-up question regarding that. So, right now or either in future, are you planning to have a separate feature set only available on the Chatwood hosted platform, which will not be present in the open source code base?
Yeah,
If
I mean, yeah. I mean, we are actually moving towards an open core business model, just like GitLab or RocketChat or any other open source company follows. So there will be so it's not based on features, but it's mostly based on persona. Like what type of users will be using a set of features, and based on the persona, there will be some kind of features which might be under an enterprise edition and not under an open source license.
got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hey,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
so sort of related to the previous question. So I just saw that Chatwood's license was MIT. So,
Yeah.
so could you tell us your thought process behind why uh, why that license? Because it gives anyone the freedom to use it for commercially as well.
Yeah, I think having licenses wouldn't, even if you are in AGPL, I don't think licenses would block somebody from using it for commercial purposes. It's just that if they are building a feature, they have to contribute back, or if they are making a change, they have to make it back to the open source code base. Licenses are not really based on the money you make. It's based on the freedom or the choice of freedom which you have. I think our thought process when we took MIT was to follow the same path which most of the companies actually do, where you give maximum freedom to your users to use it however they want, rather than uh, asking them to contribute back. It's up to them to whether they should contribute back or not. Yeah, I mean, it people have different choices. I would say like some of the people would say you need to move to AGPL to protect your company, but yeah, my thought process is same as what GitLab has been following, where yeah, I don't think like just making licenses like or changing licenses would help us from you know if somebody's actually like trying to do that, then it wouldn't help us. So yeah.
I mean, I just want to add on to that point. I mean, my understanding is like use MIT or BST kind of licenses when you're building a library, when you're building an application that someone want to use. I mean, an application that you're doing, uh, something like an AGPL is probably a good license because someone is using it or building something, they have to give whatever they use it for that. Right? I mean, so that basically stops them from packing it as part of some other commercial application
Yeah.
while using all these functionality. Right? And I think that's a very interesting safeguard in terms of the freedom that you're doing. I mean, so what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think, see, a part of our product is actually like, kind of helps people to build some integrations on top of Chatwood, which would help them to use it either in their product or like, use it in their custom use cases, which might make money, might not make money, but it's like quite uh, different. And I like, to add that question, like if I move to AGPL, it's probably like, going to block all those flexibility for users. Like, if they want to extend it for some other use case, they would not be able to do that. Like unless like, they contribute it back or something, or like, make it available in the same AGPL license. So yeah, I mean, it's more of a choice on uh, how flexibly like, people can use the product rather than like, yeah, I mean, it's based on like most people say that like freedom is one thing which you have to protect, but yeah, I mean like I have a different thought on that. That's Does that answer the question or?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I just want to kind of hear like how we kind of see that. So you don't see that as a an issue. Is someone kind of copying the entire thing and then shipping Chatwood as part of their application?
Yeah, I think like so my like so there are like different use cases which we have seen so far. One being like standard support use cases where people would be using it as like a live chat software or probably like support software. Some of the places where we have seen is like some regulated industries building some custom integration on top of Chatwood so that they can use it for a specific use case. And some of them actually use it as a conversation store for their support use cases because like it's kind of complex, like there are multiple parties like involved in a support process, so they just wanted to have a platform which is flexible enough to be like changed. It's not essentially like they are not reselling it, it's like they're actually like solving their custom use case just by using like Chatwood's code base as a base. So yeah, I think having said that, like there is always a like potential problem that like somebody can actually like take the code base and then use it as a commercial thing against us. But what we see is like we just wanted to figure out like whether there is enough people who are actually like building flexible solutions on top of Chatwood. Then that's something which we look for. I mean, being as a platform, having that flexibility to build something on top of is something which we see as a use case for Chatwood, and we want to protect that, and that's where the choice comes from. Does it help or? Sure.
Okay, so I'm absolute beginner from electrical department. Seeing hackathons, I have desire to do a project with team, but what is the path? Many people say study this programming language, study DSA, study AI, ML, like what? But I want to learn, create project. What is learning path? But the learning path is confusing for me. What do you suggest?
Yeah, I think like uh it's a broad question, so I would suggest like start something small, try something like a smaller project, see what you're comfortable with. It doesn't matter like whether you really like learn Java or like Python or C++ or JavaScript. Depends on like how much you know about the language and like how fast you can like ship products. So I would say like whatever works best for you, pick that, and then like go down that path, like learn more of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think if you still have any question, Sudarshanan, please ping or you can chat. Also, Anand, does the previous answer from Pranav like satisfies your question, or like do you have any further follow-up questions on that?
I think a general question about how do kind of people calling to hackathon. This general question like not many of them ask. Basically, offering to kind of speak to me and to help understand what they know and share with other people. So I think they can take it offline.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So from the audience again, do you have any other questions from Pranav? Okay. So there were some like these are very common questions. Although like I am keep asking this question to other speakers. So somebody who's kind of very beginner, but they want to get an internship, because that's what's everybody appeal to, that right? I'm in college, I should get an internship. So I mean, how does that work? I don't have very good deep knowledge about, let's say, Python, but I want to do an internship at some organization or company. How should somebody approach that?
Yeah, I think like what worked for us was like when we were in college, we tried to like participate in like college fest, hackathons, stuff like that. Have some kind of like exposure to what has been happening outside. Learn new technologies, contributed to some of the open source projects. So like pick something which you can do consistently, like like regularly do that, and then build a profile, which is really important. And with that profile, you can actually like apply to any of the companies to get an internship. So I think it's really important to have that kind of a profile, because people to give you a chance, like yeah, there should be something which is lacking, that like you're good at what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, in case like nobody have any question, we have had our 30 minutes with Pranav. Please go ahead, or if you have any questions still, he'll be happy to answer. Happy to answer. Anand.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for people to kind of ask questions. Otherwise, I'll pick something.
Hey, I had a question. So you said you got feedback from multiple different kinds of people, organizations over time. So how did that how was the feedback different in general? And what what about the feedback or the feedback process helped you most?
So are you talking about like how does feedbacks differ, or how do we get the feedback?
So how does feedback? How was feedback differing for you when it was coming from different kind of people? And
Yeah, yeah. So I think like use case is different, right? So if you have like for us, it's a customer communication tool, which is like a support tool which you can use to talk to your customers. So if there is like one person, the set of features which is required by that person is different from a company who has like five dedicated people who is using the product, and that is different from like a company who has like 30 or like 50 dedicated support agents, like working on this to solve customers' queries. So each of them have different set of use cases. So we have to segment like what is the set of features which is being asked by like smaller customers, what is being asked by like larger customers, and what kind of solutions we need to like build to get to a point where like we want to be in future. Like what we have in roadmap is might be different, but like there will be a set of like other options which is being asked by the community members. So yeah, I mean like there is a balance for that. But I guess like the feedback also like differs in these categories. So you can segment it based on the number of companies using it, or like based on different parameters which you can use. But yeah, I mean that differs from companies to company, or like person to companies. Does that answer the question? Or
Yeah. Just a follow up on that. So,
yeah,
how do you decide when to prioritize some feedback and sort of add that feature versus when to sort of discard that? Mm.
yeah,
Or
I
do you
think.
follow it up?
Okay. Yeah, I think like the way we work is like we take 60% of the work for building the features which we have in our roadmap, and 40% of the work will be like prioritized for what community asked for. And if there is like somebody who's actually like really asking for a feature who wants to get it done immediately, but we don't have the bandwidth, then we help the person to get that feature out so that like they can contribute back to the code base so that it's up and available. So yeah, I mean like that's how we take the feedbacks right now and like prioritize what to build and like what not to build.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Have Pranav. So I want to kind of ask you like something that I think most of them would have like how I mean what was your journey like in the sense like what was your first contribution? How did you start with the software and then and why did you actually thought of actually taking the path of open source and stuff? I mean, what excited you and what was the first project that you kind of contributed to and then what was the experience like?
Yeah, I think uh, so for me like open source has been like we know about open source for a long time. So I used to hear about open source softwares from my childhood days where like our schools were using IT at school Linux, and there was a big movement of like moving from proprietary softwares to open source softwares. So we knew about the open source software movement and stuff like that from the very childhood days itself, which is like very common in Kerala. But like my first contribution came while I was in college. I used to like work on this framework called Sales.js, which is like Rails like JavaScript framework. So yeah, I mean like it was pretty early at that point. So we used to like build applications on top of Sales. So I like whenever I saw something like on a doc, or if there is something missing like a use case, we try to document that and send a PR. And it was quite rewarding because like contributors were really nice. They would like suggest some of steps, or like they would take that as a contribution and like merge it towards the branch like master. And I'm really happy that like it's still there on their docs right now, like whatever I've like contributed like 8 years back or so, it's still there. And that's something like which is quite rewarding. And the reason why like we went open source was, yeah, we went to like open source first to get to like like larger audience where like we like we can have an impact, right? Like it's like the one of the things which we see as a good thing about Chatwood is that like it's localized in 30 different languages, and it would not have been possible if it was like a closed source product. And that like it removes boundaries. Like open source like doesn't have that kind of like strict boundary where you don't like you work in a certain fashion and you cannot do it in another fashion. If somebody like wants to use it for some other use case, like they are free to do it. Like they can fork the project and like build their own use cases. I think like open source like in that sense like reduces the boundaries, like gives more flexibility, like gives more adoption, have like larger set of people using the product. And I see that as a good thing. And I see that's how like I believe that like that's how we can create much bigger like value in the society. So yeah.
Great, thanks. So it's really kind of very interesting to hear that you kind of grew up listening to open source all around. Okay, I don't think many people here are as fortunate as you, and many of you, I think, have this aspiration of kind of I want to contribute to an open source project, right? And that many of students can come and say, how do you kind of get started with it, right? And, they may not have seen any open source before. So, what do you kind of suggest them what advice do you give them to kind of get started with open source?
Yeah, I think I'll take like my first contribution as an example. It was not like, yeah, I mean, like going on an open source project, like contributing to a code might take some time. So you have to be in the community to understand what they do, like what they are actually building. So my first suggestion would be to, like let's say if you're using Java or like Rails or anything like Elixir or any language, you can actually go to their forums, participate in their forums, so that you'll like learn more about the product or the project, and slowly like start figuring out how people are working together, like whether there is a governance model and how the features are being like developed, and how it's being assigned to different people, and how can you contribute. So that actually takes some amount of time, and you cannot sit idle to understand like just to understand what is happening, right? So participate in the community. Like if you see something which is like wrong, or like if you can add more value to documentation or like to the community, try that. That'll be the first step which I would suggest everyone to take, rather than like directly jumping into code and trying to figure out what is happening. It would be a good place to start, and from there you can slowly build your path to be a proper like code contributor, and then being a maintainer and stuff like that. Sorry. Hope that answers the question, or do I need to add some more?
Thanks, it was really wonderful. And I think being part of the community is something that a lot many people usually miss out on.
Yeah, I think most people don't value that, where you want to have a contribution, but like to have a contribution, you need to understand what the project is doing, right? And being part of the community is so valuable that, let's say like you have understanding about the project, and you can share it with 10 other people. That's something like which is much more impactful than making a smaller contribution, in my opinion. So I would suggest to evangelize the project and product, and then like start building your understanding about the project, and then start on code contribution.
Anyone else have any other questions? If not, I'll
Yeah.
go with one more. Okay. So, Vishal, do you have time?
Yeah, please go ahead. If Pranav is ready with that, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So one thing is like, I mean, so we have the survival bias in the sense we only look at people who have really successful open source projects and kind of look up to them and ask them like, how do they get started? But I think the one thing that we kind of forget is like every one of these successful people also kind of had some failures, right? And they have started some open source projects which didn't take off, right? And for every one project that kind of become big, there are other projects which haven't seen the light of the day, right? So I want to kind of talk about that a bit in the sense like what are other projects that you try to start and that didn't kind of become popular, and then I mean, so what was the experience at what point you decide to stop them and all that?
Uh, no, I'm not sure like whether it's from my end. I didn't get the question completely. Was that like were you asking for any other projects which I worked on, or?
Yes, yeah. So
All
the
right.
thing is like, when you look at Chatwood, right, this is very successful project, right? So by just looking at only Chatwood, we probably miss out the point that every for every successful project, you will probably have multiple attempts to kind of get something good. And so I want to kind of also talk about that part, like what are the other projects that you have tried, which weren't as successful.
Yeah, I think like I tried a couple of things. So like I tried building teams. So there was like this time where people were like open sourcing a lot of like Jekyll teams, or like WordPress teams, and people were like probably like starting the repository. So that's like stars might be like something which is a distant thing for us at that time. So we used to build a lot of like WordPress plugins and WordPress themes, which was not successful. Like if you look at my profile, like you would see some of the Jekyll themes, which was somewhat like have seen some light, but not like really successful. But I think as a serious project, this must be the first one which we have we must be doing. It's just that we have the idea of building an open source project, or have done some of the work in um, building some of the open source themes, or projects and stuff, plugins and stuff like that. We haven't done much bigger projects. It's just that we happen to have this one and then got to be successful. I mean,
Thanks.
again, the thing is it's not like a one-day journey. It's probably couple of years, and then from there it got to a point where it is right now.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Thanks.
Okay, seems like no other question. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Thanks Pranav, to answer all those questions. And so the hackathon starts tomorrow. If you have not created your project, please go ahead and create. And we have a good cash prize of total 10 lakhs. So build something, and you might end up winning some of those. So and in fact, I think so much people coming from anyway, it's end time. So yeah, I was just saying that please join and create a project. It is happening tomorrow and day after tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.